Gotta get them all clicked. There we go.
What button are we clicking?
Well, if I make sure I hit the right ones, then we're good to go. But
Right. Well, hello everyone. Welcome Monday, August 11th already. Can you believe this month is flying by? But of course, we want to welcome to Healing the Whole Body podcast, YouTube, our Facebook pages, Twitch, and our Instagram pages. And eventually, we will get these uploaded to iHeartRadio, Apple Podcast, and Spotify. So, with that, how's your Monday?
it's a Monday. But hey, we're alive and we're kicking and it's good. So that's the main thing. It's going good.
Absolutely.
It's busy. We're going back to school this week, and
Yeah.
so yeah, it's
Yeah.
kind of busy, but
Yeah, definitely. I noticed the increase in traffic. Yes, in Podunk, small town, their version of traffic. I
mhm.
laugh because it's like, look, I lived in Houston for how long? It's like you guys don't know what traffic is. There's five cars in front of me at the light. Like this is not traffic. It cracks me up. But yeah, no, it's kind of funny to see the differences between such a large city and such a small little town.
Yeah, welcome to the small town. That's kind of how it goes. But no,
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the change of routine, change of, getting back into a routine for many and just that type of
Yeah.
thing. So it's, like I said, teachers went back today, students go back Thursday, but it's good, right? That kind of leads into the whole topic for tonight. So,
It is. It is. So the topic tonight is why your body doesn't heal the same way year round. And I mean, really, it's seasonal shifts, right?
yeah. Yeah, it's definitely recalibrating that healing process across the seasons. So, our body runs different in summer versus winter, right? There are
Hmm.
so many variables that are different. And so if we keep the same routine, right, nothing's going to end up in change.
Right.
And if anything, it's going to end up and get worse because we are keeping it the same. If we keep the lighting the same, if we keep our food the same, and we create such a misalignment
Hmm.
that it's such a struggle. I mean, that's anywhere from, like I said, the light to the temperatures, right? And it varies between even the two of us
Oh yeah.
because my winters are a lot different than your winters.
Hmm.
um and so for me, it's cold exposure in the wintertime, and you have a lot hotter of temps in the summertime.
Hmm.
There's a lot of those variables when it comes to light and temp, but also on the food availability. We did a
Right.
challenge last winter, um, in regards to just meat, fat, and ferments, because that's typically what's available for many
Hmm.
once you get above a certain latitude. But though shifting those three things make a difference when it also comes to your hormones.
Right.
So, and that's all part of the healing process is, if we can control cortisol, insulin, and leptin, then we're pretty good at being able to heal a lot of the other effects.
Well, and what I'm hearing you say is healing is basically seasonal, right?
Hmm.
Because our body, our biology, right, is seasonal. It's based
Yeah.
on, that our internal clock. I mean, think about, in the middle of winter, we're not getting as much daylight
Right.
and UVB, and it's kind of, it's like things do slow down to food is not plentiful. And I say
Yeah.
that in there's nothing growing in the
Yeah.
middle of winter, right?
Yeah. And that's definitely, you said the UVB aspect. Many of us lose it for
Mhm.
months,
Yep.
right? We don't just lose it for a short period of time,
Right.
like our southern friends do. We end up we lose it
Yeah.
for several months, and
Yeah.
so that is the time when we should be prioritizing a little bit slower of mornings, earlier nights, and the more of the autophagy aspect. So a lot of people have heard me talk about, like circadian eating and circadian fasting. And that's the time where we should be a little bit more at rest, a little bit more healing, sending these signals, because we end up when we have the longer dark, and the later sunrise. So winter definitely looks a lot different than summer when we have early mornings. Sunrise is a lot earlier. The UVA is peaking or rising in the morning. It's just this difference in light volume that we end up when we get. So anyone that is following, like a circadian pattern, the
Hmm.
sunrise and the light, right, is so much different, because we've had people that had to get up at the same time, right? Maybe it's for work, or maybe, whatever the case. But there's a period where you have to, use more of like the red lights in the home or the blue blockers. And we've even had people comment in regards of our podcast, because there's going to be a time here, real soon, that it's going to start getting dark and I'll be sitting in my red light.
Hmm.
And there's a purpose to that, right? It's not the natural light that you see coming in my window during summer that I'm getting anymore. And
Right.
so instead of turning on a blue light and disrupting my circadian rhythm at night, I end up and I sit in red light. So, we can't be on here discussing the fact of circadian rhythm and hormones and everything else, but then here I am blasting myself, with a bunch of blue light. So
Right.
there is definitely a reason when it comes to, the fuel management of our system, which obviously insulin is, the fat storage hormone. And that is so much different. We'll talk about summer, because typically you are better insulin sensitive with the
Hmm.
light and the heat, and we're more active, and we tolerate more of those seasonal carbs. And that's, I know even with you, we've started to add more carbs in, because we both come from a place of carnivore,
Hmm.
and being too restrictive, right? And so when you transition with this, and it actually leads to better healing, um, on many fronts. I talked with
Hmm.
several people in regards of my own healing, because I was carnivore, right? I was full elimination, doing, all the different methods, high protein and moderate fat, high fat, moderate protein. But there were still things that weren't healing until I shifted with the
Hmm.
seasons and I
Yep.
started to look at light.
It's
And
funny to hear people, you know, ask you, you're still carnivore, right? You
me,
get that a lot. Yeah, you
yeah,
get that
yeah.
question a lot.
Because a lot of people end up and know me from that space originally. That's
Yeah.
where, I first made like social media presence, is where I was, working through at the time. And so, yeah, I end up and I get it. And it's like, well, no, not really. Right.
Hmm.
I may end up and have carnivore days where, I just end up and
Right.
eat meat. Um, More so in the wintertime than in the summer. I mean, I love my salads. I love my green beans. I love, we just went out and picked some tomatoes and some strawberries tonight off of our, plants in the
Ooh.
garden. So it's like, I enjoy that. Um, the elimination worked for certain things until it didn't. And
Right.
that's where, again, kind of having to shift with, the insulin and the leptin side of things, and look beyond just food.
Well, let
Um,
me stop you for a moment
mhm,
because you said you went outside and you picked tomatoes.
mhm.
Now, explain to the audience, what is that doing? What is your body recognizing when you eat the tomatoes that literally grew outside your door, right?
Mhm.
What signals is it telling the body?
So food carries what we call a light code. And when it ends up and it carries this light code, because it's grown under the certain, intensity of light, right? And when we consume foods such as, I'll just say, if I would consume a pineapple, or I would end up and consume a banana in the middle of wintertime, it's going to send my digestive system, which is a secondary circadian signal, it's going to send this light code, because the food captures and stores this information from the light and the environment that it grows. And so that information is going to tell my body what season it is in, but then my eyes and my skin that have these other receptors are telling it a different signal. And so it creates this mismatch. And that's why we always talk about the light information that your body gets, whether it's through your eyes, through your thermoreceptors in your skin, or through the food that you're consuming, it all needs to end up in a line. Because when you eat local, seasonal, there's also the aspect of deuterium and, this whole other photosynthesis. And I mean, it just goes on in regards of how these plants are grown, right? How these carbs. So it's not that carbs are bad, but carbs end up and lock in this light spectrum. They lock in, the pigmentation. They lock in all of this, right? Through the energy that it is provided to grow. Summer fruits, for instance, that are a little bit higher in sugar are higher in deuterium, but it's coated on these days where the days are longer, right? Earlier sunrise, later sunset, higher UV index, and the body and the light have the ability to sink and eliminate the deuterium. So deuterium is a heavy hydrogen isotope. And yes, certain hydrogens, such as like my hydrogen water, right, can be beneficial for the body, but this heavy deuterium is not. And it can lead to a whole slew of other issues. And that could be a whole podcast some night, as just in regards of deuterium. But when we also then end up and have winter foods, right, the cellar stable, if you will, things like a potato that you've cooked and you cooled, and it's in the fridge because it needs low light to grow, right? It grows in the ground. For anyone that's not following me here, it grows in the ground. Yes, potatoes have the green stem up above, blah 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 blah, right? But if you create it into this resistant starch, they don't spike insulin the same way that your summer fruit does. So you're able to carry some of these cellar stable root vegetables into the fall, into, more of like ferments into winter. But we all end up and have this light code of information. And like I said, eating, that tropical fruit in the middle of January, it just is going to create and throw off cortisol. It'll throw off leptin. It creates more of an insulin spike. So, it'll definitely drive that glucose up. The body pumps out insulin because it's like, whoa, wait, what is this? And so you definitely have to eat with your latitude, not just with what your body is craving.
Right. And what is in season for you is not in season for me, right? I mean, because we're that far apart from Nebraska and Texas. So now, if I was going to go visit, and let's say I visited for a week and a half, she would send me home before that. But at what point could I start eating your tomatoes?
I would end up, and normally I tell clients after they've been somewhere for 48 hours, but you also have to be consistent with the basics, right? You have to be getting up with sunrise. You have to be doing the grounding. You have to, really be in that environment and seeing that light. So for instance, when we went to Florida, right? I don't live in Florida. When we went to Florida, we were down there for a week. I enjoyed a lot of, the foods that were down there because I was down there for an extended period. We
Right.
were on the beach every morning. My husband and I would go out and we would walk the beach in the morning. We would end up and get the sunrise. We were out there during the day. I was in the ocean. Well, technically the Gulf, but because Pensacola is in the Gulf, not in the ocean. But anyway, yes, I know the difference is why I was explaining that for people. But anyway, we were in the Gulf. We were out there. I was in the natural body of water. I was
Barefoot.
just, yeah,
You were barefoot.
barefoot.
Yep.
I was just, really in sync and matching that light with what then was on my plate. So I was
Hmm.
able to have more of like the local fruits, the local foods. I did end up and have more, seafood
Hmm.
because I'm landlocked here, right? So we end up and we have to ship our seafood in, but protein's a little bit different than, your fruits and your vegetables. So that all makes a difference as far as signal and coding goes, if you will.
Absolutely. Well, and it's not just that, but it's also in the summer, if especially, summer's more social,
Mhm.
right? And we're going through more of that kind of more movement, right? Just it's a natural movement to be outdoors because you can be outdoors longer because the sun doesn't, set till later, and there's just a lot more social activities around that, and that is actually healing as well.
Yeah, and social has a big component to it, but it also, again, that movement is what makes us, more insulin sensitive because
Mm-hmm.
anytime someone will eat a meal, even if it has carbs in it, right,
Yeah,
your body is going to end up and shuttle those into the
yeah,
muscles. Walking and movement and exercise uses a lot of those larger muscle groups. And so we are more tolerant than in the winter when we're a little bit more sensitive and, indoors. But there again, it also goes into light playing a factor because
mm-hmm.
many people, right, end up and go indoors. Well, they start to kick on lights, right? They're not wearing
Right,
blue blockers. They're not wearing,
right,
and so it creates more of like this blue light toxicity as well, and this cortisol driven aspect. And when cortisol is high, glucose is high, right? So
mm-hmm.
again, they all three of them, cortisol, insulin, and leptin, play a signal of each other, where if you really start to end up and align yourself and emphasize this, you know, signaling, um, your body has a better ability to heal because it's
Mm-hmm.
not driven by inflammation, it's not driven by insulin. And so when we have the fuel management side, but then we also have the satiety signal side, which is the leptin, right? The leptin then is able to dock to the hypothalamus and everything that it needs to do through the night so that our body says, hey, we
Right,
have energy on, our belly, our thighs, our butts, etc., that we can use. We don't need as much, energy intake.
right,
um I hate the word calories. It's not all about calories in, calories out, but it's more
right,
of how is your body gaining this energy.
mm-hmm.
And when we have leptin signaling properly, then it will start to end up and fix the cortisol and the insulin. You won't have the big peaks of cortisol in the morning. You won't have, the heightened insulin throughout the day, or the secondary cortisol response in the evening because
Mm-hmm.
cortisol and leptin oppose each other. So when
Right,
cortisol is high, leptin is not going to end up and take over. But again, that also goes into your melatonin.
yeah,
So the healing aspect of it is, making sure that we also get the melatonin in there as the little scavenger.
yeah,
So any type of light, blue light, blunts that leptin signaling, and winter we are most vulnerable for that.
mm-hmm.
So that's why also, people will get seasonal affect disorder is
Yes,
because they are, creating this misalignment. So if you've ever had SAD, there are things that you can do to fix that. And we teach that, we talk about that.
mm-hmm.
Um, we talk about how to, fix your mood in the wintertime,
Mm-hmm.
what you can do to mitigate those effects.
Well, it's the shortest daylight, right, in the winter, so that's your highest melatonin that's happening, and that's why, That's why bears hibernate in the winter. I mean, seriously, it's cute to say, but you prioritize the comfort and the warmth and it's kind of a reset or repair time of year, right? Because you're not getting that. What am I trying to say?
And that's where you're not getting the social environment. And so when you
Right.
are, locked indoors in the wintertime, it's almost like this complete disconnect.
Yeah.
Um, and that's where really on the circadian and environment side, I shifted my way of
Hmm.
thinking, about 5, 6 years ago, because I live in Nebraska. I used to hate winters. I hated the cold, but I use it now to my advantage, to the point where I still go out and walk around barefoot. I still end up and go out and play in the snow in my tank top,
Yeah.
because I look at it for the healing that it is, right?
Right.
Cold exposure. You
Cold.
don't have to
Right.
end up and have a, cold submersion. Would love, if anyone is listening, I would love to end up and have a,
Yeah.
cold
Me
tank.
too. Sure.
Um,
Send it on. We'll
Feel
both
free to
take one.
sponsor. We
Yeah.
don't have sponsors, but
Nope.
hint, hint, wink, wink, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I use nature to my advantage for that. So I end
Right.
up and I do the brief cold, going out and exposing, because it also has this healing where the body will create a infrared warmth. It
Hmm.
wants to be warm. It will create that. And so those type of exposures, once I shifted that mindset, it which really comes to, anything, if we can just shift that mindset around what we're doing, right? Whether it's movement, whether it's food, whether it's our minerals and hydration, right? When I started 6 years ago, it was a case of I was going outside with my coffee. I was yet to learn, right, all that I know now of don't put coffee first thing in the morning.
Right.
But I was going out with that cup of warmth and exposing to the light, exposing to the cold. And then I realized that, caffeine before food is not optimal. And
Hmm.
so then I would go outside with my breakfast. Or I would end up and make a cup of Shilajit and go outside, where now, 6 years later, I'm able to go outside and I don't need that warmth, because
Hmm.
my body is able to transition. But when you are exposed to that, right? If you have a wolf in the winter, right? And say he was injured and you have him indoors, he's not able to experience the outside, and climate controlled indoors, but yeah, then you end up and you put that wolf outside in the middle of wintertime, it's not going to have the coat build up, right? That it
Hmm.
ends up and it needs. And so that's the difference. Same with us. If we are out there routinely and consistently, we're able to end up and expose ourselves to the point that our body knows, hey, this season is coming, right?
Yeah.
The light is changing, our days are changing, and it makes a difference on how your mood and how well you sleep. And there's things that you can end up and do to see how well you're healing, see how well that's changing.
Oh,
um
yeah.
I mean, are you sleeping through the night?
Right.
Do you wake up through the night? Are you waking up without an alarm clock? That's one of the biggest circadian and,
Hmm.
light aspects, is people aren't consistent with their sleep and wake routine.
Right. Yeah. For gosh, what do you think? About a good year and a half now, I've pretty much wake up at the same time
Hmm.
or they're about in that same area. And it's like, sometimes it's aggravating, right? Because it's like, oh, today I'm going to sleep in. And my body goes, no, ma'am, you're not. You are going to wake up at the same time that you always do. But again, it's because I'm consistent with my, the, my, the light intake with my eyes and the grounding and it is at this point a non-negotiable. I cannot not do it because the benefits that far outweigh not doing it, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Oh, absolutely. And there's been times where I'll have clients that message me, my monthly clients that are able to text me and stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
they're like, "Oh, I didn't sleep very well, but I was still up for sunrise, and I have good mood through the day." Or I had a client that messaged me and said, she was having a rough day, having a bad day, and she's like, "I just went outside and sat on my patio on the
Mm-hmm.
natural stone in the sunlight," and
Mm-hmm.
she's like, the mood lifted.
Right.
So the whole serotonin and the dopamine and all of that hormone shifts across the seasons, but it also shifts even through the day. So when we talk about circadian rhythm and we talk about infradian system, we're not just talking about, the 24-hour period, but we're talking about these seasons and
Right.
how it ends up and it changes year round.
And that's why healing is not the same from season to season.
Mm-hmm.
Why you have to change things up because and some of the clients that we both have had is they are stuck in the one way only, day in, day out, regardless of the season, and they're struggling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and a lot of people that have chronic conditions or they end up and they also get sick is for the same reason, right?
Mhm.
Circadian rhythm and the immune system, because your immune cells have their own circadian clocks.
Yeah.
And so they end up and they go hand in hand, right? If you end up on these shorter days, typically that's where you need to put more emphasis on the immune system restoration, right? The deeper cellular cleanup, the deeper cell side of things. One, yes, we are indoors, we are in confined spaces with other people, but if you build up your immune system and
Mhm.
you work on these base foundations, you have the ability to have that stronger immune system to where, I mean, knock on wood, I rarely get sick. I rarely have to take a sick day.
Right.
So, it definitely ends up and makes a difference.
Well, so I'm going to bring us back to summer for a moment. Summer,
Mm-hmm.
we know, are the longer days.
Mm-hmm.
More light means more serotonin, right? Melatonin is delayed. So we stay up later, we move more, we feel more alive in the summer. Um, Healing in the summer looks like more of that expressive movement and the outdoor functions. But we didn't talk about sweating and detoxing,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's an important factor for your healing.
Yeah.
Of course, the social connection and your creative output. Um, you know, Summer tempts us also, though, to overextend sometimes and to say yes to everything. Um, Summer healing is that sunlight on our skin. Um, and even when the sun sets. So you kind of have to stay balanced with that. You pair it with the grounding, the evening wind down rituals that you have in place, cooler foods, right? I mean, I don't know about the rest of everybody where you're watching, but I mean, we're hitting like 102 degrees actual temperature. I mean, that's not even the real feel. So, yeah, I'm not exactly going to eat.
You're not going to eat the pot roast in the middle of summer when it's
I,
100
I'm
and some degrees, but
just not gonna. Yeah, it's just
but
not. Yeah.
and you nailed it, right?
Yeah.
The longer summer daylights and
Mhm.
the more movement, the more hydration we tend to end up and
Yeah.
also have, the higher metabolism we have. And so that movement and the hydration and the way we end up when we look at it like on a cellular level, it
Mhm.
does increase, right? The lymphatic flow, it increases the whole fascia system and the exclusion zone water. And the more that we end up when we work on that cellular level and we work on the mitochondria will push out the bad. And
Mhm.
so when it is warm and you are naturally sweating, right? You don't have to buy the $1,000 of sauna, just end up and
Right.
go outside, right?
Yep.
The warmth naturally encourages this and it wants to end up in detox. And so any of the heavy metals, right? We're constantly exposed to things. Sorry, friends, we can't necessarily, outrun things that are in the environment outside. So we can control the toxins in our home, right?
Mhm.
We
Yep.
have that ability.
Yep.
But our body and our cells do end up and store some of these toxins. And that's maybe it's from years history, right? Maybe you are someone that is fairly new at this and you've come from standard American diet where it's ultra processed foods and, maybe you were putting synthetic, lotions on your skin and the list goes on and on. Your body, once you start aligning, may end up and feel at times because of this warmth and this detox effect that a little fluish. But that is what we end up when we talk about with these primary detox pathways that are opening up, and especially in people that are losing weight, they may end up and see kind of this shift, right? Look at the bigger picture. Don't just look at the day and say this isn't working. What have you changed, right? Is it higher UV exposure? Have you boosted the vitamin D? Have you, detoxing these cells? Are you increasing, movement where you're breathing in more and, more rapid breathing and you're getting more of that nitric oxide? All of that stimulates and promotes cellular repair, but it also does the detox side. So there are foods that can help with that, that end up having different nutrients. I'm choosing my words wisely here. Different nutrients to them, right? The
Right.
polyphenols and all of that, that can be beneficial. I was just talking with a client earlier in regards of arugula, and it helps with the liver. You
Yeah.
know, cucumbers and the other greens and all of that end up and help. But then there are those foods like I was talking about, the summer fruits that are higher in deuterium. But if you're supporting the body, it
Mm-hmm.
does end up and have the ability. Um, Hormones also end up and change. So, those three hormones end up and boost fat metabolization. I can't even talk tonight. So, it does end up and make a difference when you're sweating, when you're swimming in these natural bodies of water, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to end up and go swimming in the lake in the middle of winter time because it's iced over, you know.
Oh, come
So,
on, Becky.
I mean, I guess I could end up and, go do
Do
a
the
polar
cold
plunge,
polar.
break
Yeah. Yeah.
break the ice at the lake and
Oof.
swim.
Yeah.
So all of those are natural detox boosters. The
That's
grounding, the
funny.
sweating, the swimming, any of that is going to end up in help.
So let's talk about fall because we kind of jumped, we skipped, we went from summer to winter, but we didn't talk about fall, right? And fall is, I always think of fall as like a transition
Mhm.
time, because our light is starting to fade. You more than me. The melatonin rises earlier. Cortisol may spike with the change. You may feel more sensitive, more reflective, even more tired. Um, Healing in the fall might be something where um, boundary setting and warm meals and letting go and journaling. If you think about it, the trees shed their leaves. Well, they're not broken, right? Because they've served their season and now they're getting ready to go into winter. So let's kind of talk about fall with what's happening to the body and why that healing looks different in the fall.
And you nailed it. Fall is the transition time. We're shifting from this high energy, high growth, food in abundance, summer mode into this deeper repair and, repair and restore
Hmm.
season. The daylight shortening, the temperatures dropping, this whole circadian signaling slows down a little bit. So again, prioritizing that immune system side over the rapid detox of the sweating, right? So the foods are going to also end up in transition. So instead of eating things like your higher sugar
Hmm.
fruit, right? You're going to end up in transition more into like apples and cruciferous vegetables and the squashes and the pumpkins and the root vegetables and all of those, grounding nutrient rich type foods because they still assist in the energy side. So when we look at the body and the energy that it's providing, it likes, especially the thyroid and the whole T3, T4 conversion aspect, likes those carbs.
Yes.
And so wintertime, you will see that transition into the lower deuterium foods, right? That again are going to end up and support the mitochondrial efficiency and shifting towards that repair. The arugula, the dandelion greens, all of those are going to help to filter some of those toxins out that we've maybe gained, and help with digestion in the cooler months. But the hormone side is also shifting as well. And that's where, in order to control that cortisol, right, the blue blockers are going to start coming in because sunset's going to end up and be earlier, while many of us need light, right? They end up and they don't have red light or orange lights. Like I had an amber light on today in my home, because it was raining and crappy all day. We've had 6 inches of rain in the last 3 days. So yeah, it rained. We had, I think, 2 inches today. It rained pretty good. But it was overcast and it was cloudy, and because it was raining, it was dark. I didn't want to turn on, bright blue lights, right? Bright LED lights. So I had an amber color bulb and I turned that on. It just made for a more soothing, less invasive environment. Didn't heighten the cortisol that was already elevated today. Anyone that knows what I do, it was already elevated.
I'm sure it was.
But that also prepares for this consistency when it comes for bedtime tonight.
Right.
So,
well, you're going to feel that melatonin kick in. You're going to feel like your body's like, I mean, we've been on meetings and it's like, it's 8:30 and I can feel my melatonin kicking in, and it's like, okay, guys, I'm signing off because it is bedtime. I know Coach Sly does that all the time, right? So she's very consistent with that. So that takes us into like winter, right? And we touched on it. Winter is definitely, it brings the shortest days. The melatonin is at its peak. The serotonin dips. Your energy slows. Your circadian rhythm shifts into like a deep rest mode. It's repair. I don't think it's necessarily lazy. What do you think on that?
No, because many people are still very active in the wintertime, especially, anyone that is living where, it snows, right? They're still active. They'll go out skiing, they go snowshoeing, they scoop the snow, right? There's definitely this aspect of activity. So I wouldn't say that it is lazy. Yes, you can give yourself permission to end up and not be as active, right? The lifestyles are going to end up and change. So the thing though with cold exposure, and because I see the question over why do I go and do cold exposure in the wintertime in a tank top? Why do I play in the snow in a tank top, basically? Cold exposure has a lot of benefits when it comes to boosting the brown fat activity, and how our mitochondria use that. And so the cold helps to uncouple that to where we are able to use it as usable energy. Just cold air temperature. So there's different aspects when it comes to the cold exposure, the time, the temperature, the technique, all of that. But it does end up, even just going outside and exposing yourself to the cold does have benefit. So you don't, it's one of those good, better, best scenarios to answer your question. Yes, cold submersion is the best, but being able to, still go out and expose yourself and repair is still beneficial. So having
we've all seen you doing snow angels in shorts and a tank top. Yeah. And bare feet. And, but you didn't start out doing that.
No.
You've definitely worked your way up. And this past winter, we actually got snow in Texas. It was crazy. And we started this crazy challenge of filming ourselves walking barefoot in the snow, and it's like, oh my goodness, I can do it. And I was, right? And then everybody was tagging each other, and we were doing this on social media. We had a blast doing that.
Yeah, the BNC community and social
Yeah.
media, um, we kind of took to the trend of doing our bare feet in the snow,
Yeah.
but obviously we were safe about it, right? We weren't out there getting frostbite, but
No.
um, yeah, it's just this whole different aspect of repair and habits to create in the wintertime. Um, that make a difference. And I do eat with the seasons, so I prioritize the animal proteins, but then the ferments, bone broth,
Yeah.
mineral rich foods, those type of things. Bone broth is great in the wintertime for gut healing, for just that warmth when you end up, especially if you make it homemade and use those good collagen rich bones. It's really good for the gut to support the digestion. And just typically in the wintertime, if we stop eating before bed, having a little bit of bone broth in the evening time helps.
Yeah. So let's talk about spring. Like, we haven't talked about spring yet when we've been at this almost 45 minutes tonight. So let's talk about spring. So spring is thawing, right? We're coming out of winter where the light is starting to return, the serotonin is starting to rise, the cortisol is stabilizing, your body begins to waken up, and you're probably feeling like more motivated, right? I got to get outside and I got to clean up the yard, and I want to, and let's
Mhm.
get things going. I want to be more creative. I want to be ready for, what is spring look. Let's think about how my garden's going to be, and you know, healing in the spring looks like maybe, like I said, planning and walking, and all of a sudden, right? We're planting things. Things are happening. Um, it's that first like green shoot that pops up out of the ground. It's fragile, but it's ready. Um, we don't want to rush through spring, correct?
Correct. It's more of this time where we're awakening, right? We're starting to see the increase of daylight. We're starting to see better temperatures. We're really setting that circadian signal to shift from, conserve, 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 right? Be
Hmm.
safe, conserve, repair, into this time of growth, into this time of activity, into this, you don't just go from lifting nothing, right, in a gym and into lifting, hundreds of pounds, right? You work and you build that muscle, and the same thing goes with the seasons and how we're shifting. Our hormones end up and respond to this new light code that it's getting. And, even the thyroid hormones. So we talk about serotonin and dopamine a lot, but the thyroid hormones and just the
Hmm.
metabolic output and the increase in motivation. I mean, testosterone's in there too,
Hmm.
but the mitochondria start to get more of this UV light input, which ends up in sparks, right? Sparks more of this energy production. It creates more of that cellular turnover. So it's just kind of how our body is responding to these seasons, how the food, right? And that's happens at different times. So again, if I was in Texas, spring's going to look a lot
Oh
different,
yeah.
right,
Oh yeah.
than what it is here versus what it is for, our friends that are watching up in Canada. It's going to look different, right? So just because I'm starting to add foods back in a seasonal manner, things like asparagus, spring greens, those type of things, just because I added doesn't mean that it's right for, our friends in Canada.
Right.
You may end up and have, I know you had talked about the spring berries coming
Hmm.
in. And I'm
Hmm.
like, I
Yeah.
mean, it's like
Yeah.
strawberry season for me right now, you know?
Yes, that's
So,
long gone. Yeah. We're way
yeah,
past strawberry season here.
yeah. So, me going out my back door and picking my strawberries
Yeah.
is definitely not aligned with the friends in the South that have 100-degree temps, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's yours is in the spring, and those foods also again start to build these higher sugar foods, right? End up and start to build that deuterium aspect, and it's enough of for fuel of growth and the whole cellular thing. But again, we start to see this increase in the blue light, right? The UVB light, right? We always end up and have UVA, but we start to see this UVB come back.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts out at a really small, for those of us that lose it, it starts at a really, really small window, but then it ends up and it opens. And this signals to the body to start to shed, right? Some of that stored energy, ramp up its activity, ramp up, the hormone side of things. And we start to rise earlier. We start to end up in transition, to, light being later, and just this whole flexibility that we have. Insulin sensitivity improves. And so we're more insulin resistant in the wintertime when we don't have all the activity, we don't have the light, we start to gain this sensitivity. The leptin starts to recalibrate, to help with regulating the appetite. So it just boosts all of this on the HPA, HPG axis. And anytime, we help and nature assists us in this whole hormone system, we end up and we live, more optimally. I talked in a group meeting the other day about the fact that, I had a hysterectomy at 29, but I've never had to do HRT.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you support your body on a hormonal level, right, you may not, and I'm not going to end up and put it out there and say, you don't have to, you may
Right.
not need
Right.
HRT.
Right.
And because it's not necessarily needed by everyone, right? If your thyroid and your adrenals and your body is all having these lifestyle practices and light rhythms the way it's supposed to, then
Right.
you're living in sync, right? So
Well,
the body.
your body's a clock,
Hmm.
right? I mean, isn't that what we're really saying?
Yep.
I mean, and to add on to that point you're making about, the hormones and the thyroid, and I tanked mine. I tanked mine so incredibly bad because I stayed militant carnivore for far too long.
Hmm.
And I did damage to my body instead of repairing it. And and trust me, it was a struggle to come out of that, to not be that militant carnivore. Oh my goodness. Um, and I had to learn to add back the seasonal foods and the fermented foods, and um, my body has responded phenomenal now to where it was what, 8, 9 months ago,
Hmm.
9 months
Hmm.
ago, 10 months ago, about 11 months ago now. But yeah, so I did myself a serious disservice, and we see that a lot, because again, people don't realize that your body is a clock, and it's biological, it's emotional, it listens to the sun, it responds to the dark, but healing is in spirals. Like, it is
Hmm.
never straight lines. It is not curvy. Like up one day you could be down like
Hmm.
we're going backwards, then we're spiraling this way. And um but that's the thing about healing. And once you start to kind of tap into what the seasons hold for your body, um it kind of is freeing, I would say.
Yeah,
Did you find
definitely.
it freeing? Yeah.
I was to say definitely, yeah. Anytime that we look at the transitions, right? Um, this whole a lot of time again, I'll go back to my coaching session that I told someone today. I said a lot of times, even in people that are tracking, they ask me about a tracking meter, and I said people hyper fixate on that to where they don't listen to the intuitive side of their body,
Yep.
right? They end
Yep.
up and they stress over hitting a certain macro, or they stress over a certain amount of steps, or they stress over, X, Y, and Z. Where instead, what is your body telling you? What are those? What is it giving you as feedback, right? What symptoms are you being exposed to? What or having? What, all of that is feedback of what you
Yep.
are doing. And
Yep.
so I will typically end up and ask people, how are you sleeping? How is your mood? How is your energy? There's so many of these type of questions that you can end up and ask to
Yep.
really know, am I aligning? Am I, you know, looking at everything that I can end up and do, right? Um, did I do all my sunlight that I needed to do? Did I eat
Mhm.
enough, right? That's another thing
Oh, yeah.
is people misguided hunger signals.
Mhm.
So, the natural satiety, or again, the mental aspect, right? Them end up and telling themselves I should be eating less.
Yes. Or that
And
calorie restriction.
yeah.
Mm.
So, once you stabilize that hunger, right, you have fewer evening cravings. You
Mhm.
have this natural satiety. You
Mhm.
don't have to look at it and be like, oh, this is all I should be eating,
Right.
right? But
Right.
again, that energy should be stable, right? Not wired and tired, right? And you shouldn't have these 3 p.m slumps, right, where you're reaching
Right.
for the caffeine. You
Right.
should just, your training also, right, should end
Mhm.
up and be appropriate with the season. And I'll, when we get ready to close, I'll end up and I'll discuss that. But your training should, what I do for training in the summer is different than what winter looks like.
Mhm. Mhm.
Digestion should be better. You shouldn't be bloated. There's a lot of those things to know if you are aligned, to know, and just, really be present with yourself and do that quick audit of, how am I feeling?
Mhm.
Right? Journal about it. We end up when we put out a journal. And how's your mood? What's the moon, right? There's a lot of people
Mhm.
that even their energy will shift depending on the moon. And it's just that aspect. And your journal don't have to make sense,
No.
but you'll start to see a pattern with the seasons as it ends up and changes.
Right. Well, and that's why I created the my macros and healing journal, because it incorporated more than just food,
Hmm.
right? It incorporated the moon phases and your sun, and yeah, there's even check boxes for water, and are you staying hydrated enough, and because I realized the importance of all of it in a package. But I did find too that when I was a less rigid, and I know you are as well, when we're less rigid of that. Um, Constantly writing down every morsel that we've eaten, tracking, getting on the scale every day. The what do you call it on your finger?
Oh, my
Tracking
aura
your
ring.
sleep, your Oura
Yeah.
Ring, right? Tracking that, and um, you can get real caught up in the numbers, and it starts driving you. I know. What was it last year? Was it last year at this time, or you you took scales out of your house, like you took your Oura Ring off, you
Hmm.
stopped tracking, like you put a kibosh to everything and kind of leaned in more intuitively. Now I know that because we coach, right, we're testing things, we're doing things like that. So if you see us doing that, there's a kind of a method to our madness. But I haven't tracked. I'll track every now and then what I eat, just to make sure that I'm on track per
Hmm.
se. But at this point, my eating is super intuitive at this point. I know how much, meat this is. I know how much my whole hand is. Um, I can eyeball stuff. But that's been a long time in the making to get me to that point. But the intuitive side of that gave me a freedom of not beholding to the number because I spin out. If you go back and read some of our blogs that we've done, I've wrote about how numbers spin me out.
Hmm.
And it does some people. It doesn't you. You love it.
Yeah. I use it more as a metric. Like I
Yeah.
said, that mindset shift, right?
Hmm.
When I talked about the mindset shift of not only the winter and the temperature, but it's also that mindset shift of the data that I'm getting, right? It's just data to me, right? Yes, I still have my Oura ring. I put it back on, and there are certain things that I track. I don't necessarily track and weigh all of my food, unless I'm doing something specific, because I will put together a couple different programs and do that type of thing. But if I am just day in day out, there's times where my Oura ring will die. I can tell you right now, my Fitbit's on my wrist and it's dead. So I'm not tied to them. They do not define my day. It's not like, oh, I slept like crap and oh, I've only got, a 70 sleep score. My day's just going to end up and be ruined, right? No. I know typically what goes into my day. I know what goes into the evening. Um, I know what goes into the recovery side. And that's one thing that, we really, other than in the wintertime, haven't discussed tonight is recovery, even in, spring, summer, and fall, is just as important as our recovery in the wintertime.
Hmm.
So it's not just always about go, 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 right? There is that aspect of you've got to be able to recover too, from a hormone side, but also from a muscle and body and, fatigue side.
Right.
So there's definitely a difference in, I guess I'll call it a blueprint, a difference in, what the
Hmm.
blueprint would look like as far as what spring for, hormone focus, for food focus, for movement focus is going to look like in summer and in fall and in winter. And it's all going to end up in transition based on that initial signal of light.
Yeah. If we have sparked something in your mind, please post in the comments. We would love to read those. Does anyone have any questions? I'm looking over here on my other social media and I don't have any questions. I don't know about you.
I was just say, let me look. Come on, Instagram. I don't see any over here on YouTube. Um, but yeah, it definitely, like I said, it all makes a difference. It all ends up in little lines, and it's just a matter of how to end up and put these habits into place. And I know it can end up and seem overwhelming at
Yeah.
first
Yeah.
because we've all been there, right?
Yep.
When we get this information, it's like a fire hose, if you will, of
Yeah.
information, and it's overwhelmed. It's like, where do I end up and I start? Um, okay, so can I eat fruit in the winter? Um, Again, that's going to end up and depend on the person. I eat
Hmm.
fruit. My fruit's fermented, right? I'll eat some fermented
Right.
blueberries. I have fermented cranberries, um, because I do longer ferment yogurt. So it's the El Ruderi El Gazari yogurt, and I'll put a little bit of the fermented fruit on top of it. So
Right.
yeah, you can. Um, I'm scrolling down here. Do you need to be perfect and perfect with sunlight? Don't, my friend always says, and love her dearly, don't let perfect be the enemy of good.
Right.
So, no, you don't have to be perfect. Consistency beats perfection. If
Right.
you can get out there, even if it's cloudy, even if it's rainy, like I was standing in the doorway today, because again, it was downpouring rain. I was not going to end up, not to say that I never have, but I was not going to end up and go outside
Yeah.
in the rain.
Right.
And So yeah, I just stood in the doorway. Was it perfect? No, perfect would have been, outside, feet to the
Mhm.
ground and all of that, but I still was there, right?
Mhm.
I was still did it, and maybe that's through an open window. You don't have to be
Yes.
perfect to end up and do it.
Right.
Um, why am I hungry at night? I can't seem to get past nighttime cravings. Check your lighting. What is your evening light? What is your evening routine? You may have to change up your evening routine because if you are someone that has had a history of nighttime snacking or nighttime hunger,
Mhm.
typically you probably have blue lights on in your home, overhead lights, lamps, anything along those lines, sitting
TV,
in front of a
phone,
TV,
yeah. Yep.
doom scrolling, right? Scrolling social media, anything along those lines. Or you maybe didn't eat enough at dinner. And
Right.
that's one of the things where making sure that you get enough protein. For me, protein is my staple. My fats and my carbs are my lever. So some days I
Mhm.
have higher carbs, some days I have higher fat. But making sure that your meal composition that works for you and your goals. Um, and then the final aspect for nighttime hunger is your stress load. What does your stress look like? Has, cortisol been a factor in your day? Are you eating because you're stressed? Are you eating because you're, angry? Are you eating, what are you eating? One of our coaches in the community, Coach Sly, we'll talk about the halt. Are you hungry, angry, lonely, tired? If you're any of those, right, don't end up and eat, do something different.
Mhm.
um, but yeah, so that could be why you're hungry at nighttime.
Well, we definitely want to invite everyone to the BNC community. We have opened it up for free. Yes, we
Okay.
did. We did. So if you're sitting here and you're listening to us and you're going, this is so far over my head, I'm not going to get it. We want you to join us in the BNC community. So when you go to www.bncommunity.com, use the code FREE and you will be able to attend, what do we say, 10 plus meetings a week,
Mm-hmm.
socials, like minded people. That doesn't mean that anybody is shaming anybody. That doesn't mean that we're all eating in a certain way. I can promise you, we all eat different. We are all in different stages of our healing journey. And having community is huge, um, a huge plus in that social aspect, to have those people that are walking the journey with you give you ideas. You have access to the coaches, and anything you want to add to that, Becky?
Nope. Join us in the community. And remember your key practices year round. And that is always follow the sun, respect the sun, live by the sun, eat local, eat seasonal, and cycle your carbs, cycle your fasting, and respect any repair season that you may end up and be in. We appreciate you all. Would love to end up and help you as a community. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Have a great one, everyone.